Good morning. How's everybody this wonderful morning? Well, it sure is a good one. This is all about control. Anybody here got control issues? Okay, yeah. Okay, well, I guess it's going to be different than I thought it was going to be. Yeah, it's all about central control. That's the topic I've been assigned. And hello, can you help me out there? Have you ever asked for help before? Because everything going on around you just seemed to be too overwhelming and you needed some help. And you know, really, the first thing that we always do is we always look outside of ourselves. If you get right down to push coming to shove, we're always saying, God, can you help me? And we're always looking at something outside of ourselves. And we got to understand that that's not the reality, because there isn't anybody or anything out there that is going to help us. Okay? Because, well, I hate to tell you that, but it's just true. Because the central control of how we govern and run our life is part of a larger system of control, which is brought to us through laws and principles. And so central control is in here. Of course, we've got lots of good examples of that. Houston, we have a problem. How many remember that? Apollo 13. If you haven't ever seen the movie Apollo 13, one of the most profound and deeply metaphysical and most powerful movies that you can ever see in your life is Apollo 13. And look at it from the point of view of metaphysics and how things work. Okay? Because there was a serious problem that those folks had. But it was the coming together and the working with definite spiritual principles and ideas that helped them get back. And of course, we got Captain Log, Stardate 41386.4. We are in pursuit of a starship of Ferengi design. Our mission is to intercept and recover a T9 energy converter, blah, 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 blah. Anybody know that one there? Yeah, it's Star Trek, okay? But there's always this Stardate, there's always this command and control structure that's in place. How about the one I really liked that I saw a couple of years ago with Anna? We toured the Churchill War Rooms. Have anybody ever heard of that? The Churchill War Rooms is the underground war rooms that Churchill built for his cabinet in London during the bombing of London by the Nazis. And that was the command center which controlled the entire British army and population. However, the truth of the matter was, that was the command center for that. That was not Churchill's command center. Churchill's command center was at an estate called Chartwells, which was just outside of London in New Hampshire. And that's where Churchill went. And in his gardens, that's where he went and sat and became quiet. And that's where the real control center for what happened in WW2 was. Ann and I had that chance of going there and seeing it. So it wasn't in where all the paperwork was being done. That's where he plotted his personal strategy to deal with it, was in the peace, the silence, and the stillness of his garden. Okay? So let's be real clear that the control center, no matter where we go or what we do or who we think is in charge, is really inside of us. That's where the control happens. Except we've got to deal with all those different characters. One of the things that I really like, and we're going to talk about this from everything from Star Trek right through to what Jesus did, right back to the command center at the birth of Christ. I'm going to tell you today how they're all the same. There's no difference in the story that they're told. Dr. Holmes said, "We have no record of Jesus asking God to do anything except for one incident in the Garden of Gethsemane, and that was before the trial and all of that stuff. But other than that, aside from that instance, Jesus' method of approach during his entire ministry was to give thanks and command the law to work." Okay? He gave thanks. That's what St. Paul said to the Romans in that. In all things give thanks. Give thanks not for all things, but in all things you do, have an attitude of gratitude and thanksgiving before you start. So give thanks, and then you command the law. It's not asking, begging, pleading, beseeching. It's a direct comment into a force or a law that is neutral, that operates through us by means of us, and will bring to us whatever we feed in there. So if we feed doubt, if we feed fear, if we feed low self-esteem, we get it back. But if we put into it confidence and faith and trust, we get it back. It's not a matter of whether it works, it's just a matter of what do we want to get back. That's the question we got to ask ourselves. And so he goes on to say, this is the correct manner of approach to the Spirit and the law. Yet we have any record of another man apparently trying to follow the divine will? No. When Jesus healed people and told them to get up and walk, he did not pray that they might be able to get up and walk. Never said that. He exercised an authority which seemed to be the result of his communion with the Spirit, and undoubtedly it was. Practice is a definite statement of mind and a positive affirmation. So we keep practicing that all the time. It is an active, conscious, aggressive mental movement, and in such a degree as it embodies an idea, there is no longer anything in our mind which denies this idea. It will take form because it now becomes part of the law and order of the universe in which we live. Now, the important part. The law is subject to spirit and is its servant. Man is spirit, but until we know this, he will only half use the law, for he will not have a clear understanding to fall back upon. So, we need to understand the nature of the laws, because they work whether we understand them or not. If we understand them, we can work with them. So we got all kinds of laws. Just to give you an idea of a couple of laws that we have the law of gravity. How many people are going to join me after the session today? Because what we're going to do is I come up with a new idea that if we mentally believe it, we'll walk off that building and walk on air. How many are coming today? A few. Yeah. We need to talk to these two guys later. Yeah, well, of course, we know that there's a law of gravity and it's going down. Look at the law of electricity. Lights this beautiful room. We get to use it. And if we use it in the way we've got electricity, it runs all our appliances. It runs cars. However, there's a destructive side when you misuse the law. Have you ever noticed that? I experimented it. It's one of my favorite stories. When I was a youngster, about 11 or 12 years old, and I was at home, and for some strange reason I had this notion. I got a lamp. Now kids, don't you try this, even though Papa did. And he took the light bulb and screwed it out. And I thought, well, what would happen if I stuck my tongue in there? Well, I did try it. And it didn't get all the way in when it arced. And several minutes later, when I got off the ground, in the living room, off the floor, I realized that I wasn't ever going to do that again. Okay? True story. I'll never forget that experience. It wasn't so bad as the experience. It was just remembering when I come through and remembered, I'm not doing that again. It's not right. So you can use electricity any way you want. It can light that, or it can light you up. But I don't recommend the second one because it's just not that great. So there's the law. Does the electricity care how I used it? No. Not at all. So the spiritual laws are sowing and reaping. So when you go out this year to select your garden seeds, let's take a bunch. Let's get some thistles. Let's get some stinkweed. Oh, let's get some pot seeds. And we're going to go out there and plant all of those, and no our vegetables are going to come up. Well, no, they don't. Don't be so silly. If you plant that, that's what you're going to get. Everybody on board with that one? Yeah, we all got that one, right? Sure. So the law of mind works on the same basis. That's one of the basic principles. Central command, sowing and reaping. Hello there. Hello. Are you listening? What are you sowing today? If you're sowing trash, you'll get trash. I don't care. I'm not listening to that. I'm going to go do it anyhow. Oh, why does this always happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? Does that sound familiar? So, you know, if it's sowing and reaping, one of the key things I always counsel people with, if you don't like what you're getting, have a look at what you're giving. That's a really good place. Because if you don't like what you're getting, there's only two reasons why you're getting it. Because of what you're giving or what you're asking for. How come that could be what I'm asking for? Well, sometimes that is what we need to learn to get through to what it is, what we're asking for. So there's a command structure that works that way. So when things come to us, we don't need to put a lot of judgment on it. We just need to put some reflection on it to see where we're coming from and what we're all about. So it's the command center, and of course, the command center is like a ship. You got all the captain and the lead hands and everything, but when you have mutiny on the ship, you've got a problem. Anybody ever had any mutiny in their head lately? Sure. There's an author by the name of Hal Stone and Sidra Winkleman, a couple. They wrote a lot of really good books, and one of his favorites that I like is called Embracing the Inner Critic. And if you really begin to examine yourself of all these little commands and little voices that you have within inside your mind, you understand that it's just like one of those starships, like the USS Enterprise, with that vast crew. And everybody's got their job. And just like in our head, all those little parts got the job. Why? There's the nice person, and then there's the nasty person. You know which one that is, you know. And then there's the victim. And then there's the volunteer. So there's a lot of different positions that we played. And then we might even need some Christmas therapy. I come across a group of Christmas characters. I just thought I'd bring that out. Christmas group therapy. And these, you think you have problems. Well, we got the elf here. And he's in the therapy session. He said, well, I'm trapped in a dead-end job. Then you got Rudolph, and he says, all the other reindeer laugh and call me names. And then the snowman, he says, I think I'm bipolar. And then there's Santa. He says, I don't believe in myself. Okay? And you see, it all happens inside of us. That's where central control is. And the sooner we stop thinking about living in a system where there is some kind of separation between us and whatever's running the show, we're better off. Because whatever, I hate to tell people this, but whatever the running the show isn't some man in particular, out there that's old in particular, that's white in particular. All of those things wouldn't fit if we were going to do a real spiritual profile of what God is based on where we come from. Because none of those work. It isn't that. We have to quit beseeching and begging and pleading or asking, okay, for something from somebody or something that can't give it to us, because that something really doesn't have a personal agenda that takes care of everybody's notes, even though with technology it would still be pretty hard today. Okay? We have to understand that we're living in a spiritual system where we are the control, and we have the command center, and we have the power and the ability to be able to move forward. Now, this story and this idea is nothing new. If you went back into Matthew chapter 2, I'll just read a couple of these lines quickly to refresh us. I don't think you forgot the story, but now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the day of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, where is that king born of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and we have come to worship him. And when Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently, what time did the star appear? And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search diligently for the young child. And when you have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. Sounds like a story to me. When they heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before him until it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And when they came into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country and went another way, strange, defying the king. And when they departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. Wow, so how does that got to do with central control in the command center? And what does that mean to you and me? Nice story, we told it. Physical story, what happened? Historical. But there's also, when we're dealing with all of these, remember, the Bible was written not to provide a historical record. Not to provide that type of information. It was written to provide us with guidelines of how to run our inner life and our outer life. Most often we look at the outer, we ignore the inner aspects of that. We have to remember that they didn't carry around slates there and distribute them for people that wanted to take home some, I guess it would be called heavy reading in those days. Okay? The way they conferred and transferred spiritual messages was through story. And every name in the Bible represents their nature. And if you read that, you understand that some of the guys' names, like Simon, got changed to Peter. Why? Oh, well, I didn't like the way I was or who I was hanging out with, so I just tried a new identity. Not quite. The name changed because his nature changed. Okay? When the nature changed, the name changed. So everything in the scripture is symbolic. So the East represents the inner consciousness. It represents that ability that we have to rise to the situation and to, given all obstacles, be able to carry through and accomplish what it is that we have a desire to do. And you know as well as I do, some of the greatest things that you've done has had a lot of struggle and a lot of opportunity to move beyond limitations when you've done it. Okay? That's what the East is. The star is our inner conviction of our abilities to do all that we can. And the wise men, funny there are 3. Why not 6? Why not just 1? You don't really need a whole lot. Why 3? 3 is symbolic of the perfect cycle. It's the body, mind, and spirit. It's the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. It's the head, heart, and the soul. Or very simply, that we can all relate to, it's the seed, the soil, and the plant. It's the creative process. And so the wise men are the stored up resources that we have within each and every one of us that rise to the surface when something stirs them. When you get stirred by something, when something comes inside of you and stirs you, and that begins to rise, and the desire begins to come, and then you begin to see it clearly and see the possibilities of being or doing something you never expected or believed you could be, or never ever thought you'd be. Never mind, when I was going through all of my stuff, I never went, well, I'll just put in 17 years of being on the other side of the law and everything like that so that I can have a revelation and become a minister. No, it wasn't like that. It's something that rises within us. Some idea, a project. I know Vera's got a project for next year and rising within her. And I know a few other people that got some projects that are rising within there. And when you latch onto that, and that desire and that whatever that comes from there to do it, that's the wise men in us. And of course, there they are, bearing the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, which we all have. The gold is representation of the riches of spirit, and the frankincense is the beauty of the spirit, and the myrrh represents the eternality of the spirit. So that represents that gift that we have that's part of the human experience. Yeah, somewhere along the line, just like, oh, my car was running rough this morning. You know, I got 279K on it, so we're taking Anna's car south this year. She's only got 69. Because when it gets older and that, it, you know, wears out a little bit. Just like the body. Have you noticed that, any of you? Well, don't worry, some of you will. Some of you haven't yet. You haven't, have you, Zach? No, you're just starting out. You don't know about that. But you will when you're as old as Papa is. And that doesn't really matter because the spirit doesn't get old. The law doesn't change just because you're older and wiser. I wish. It just still works the same way, and it doesn't take a whole lot to get stupid fast. We could do that real fast. All we got to do is have a little incident and we can get off on stupid land. Okay? And that's not reserved for younger people. It's reserved for us older people too, as I've noticed lately. Okay? So it's the gifts of the Spirit that are there for us to use. And then, of course, the angels are the messengers of God. Those are our spiritual perceptive faculties that are always centered in God. So when we turn to Spirit, when we open up, then we can be guided, led, or inspired. The problem is, as most people say, oh, I don't know the difference between my intuition and my human self or my ego. I can't tell the difference between an intuitive feeling and a human feeling. Well, actually you can. Actually you can. You can distinguish that. But it requires patience and willingness and desire, and also being able to accept that sometimes when you make a decision, you might not have read it correctly and it's going to be wrong. Has anybody ever had that happen? You thought you were right and you were wrong? Ooh, I don't even want to get into it. The list is too long. Okay? But here are some guidelines about following that intuitive feeling or that still voice inside. It'll announce itself with a different type of a feeling. It'll be just is. It would be called maybe boring. Because, you see, Spirit is. So when the idea comes to you, it'll come as a different idea. It won't announce, hey, this is God speaking. Listen to this. If you hear that, it's not Spirit. That's ego. Okay? Because Spirit is. When I studied Yogananda, he taught about the wave of the neutralization of the waves and likes and dislikes. He said, don't get overly excited about the good things or overly down about the bad things, because he says it's going like this if you do that. He says you want to go along like this. Neutralize the waves of likes and dislikes. That sounds pretty boring, but when you go in that medium, it's easier to follow the guidance of Spirit, because Spirit just is and operates in that medium. The human self operates in this one. Zing! Wow! This is to be it. Whoa, what happened to me? And it goes all over the place like that. Okay? And the feelings are usually a lot more intense and the voice is louder. So you generally know that that's the ego self, not the spiritual self. And then you got to watch who you give command and control to the ship. Now, generally, the captain here's got a pretty good handle on the ship. But I'll tell you, those are those days when the captain's locked and trapped down there and tied to the pickle barrel when in the holds, and the mutinous crew's running the ship. And there's mayhem and problems all over the place. Does there anybody have days like that? Yeah. I had a couple of years like that, 3 of them actually, but that's another story and another lesson. But then again, okay, so what's the real important character? Maybe we could buy into all of that, okay, about that being ourselves. But what about this guy Herod? What about him? The ruling will of the physical, it's the ego in us. which is nothing wrong with it, except the ego is in life for itself. The ego part of us actually is quite selfish. Okay? Oh, I want to go worship the new king. No, I'm just saying that because I want to go there and get the competition and get rid of it. That's what the real story is, right? But haven't you ever heard the ego say, oh, it won't matter just one more time? Has anybody ever done that one? Just one more time, I'll start on Monday. Sound familiar? I've had more one more day times than I've had more daytimes. Period. Okay? So this is the ego that is committed to the world of the sensual realm. So that part of the command center is looking after me. And it doesn't really matter about other people. It matters long as I get what I want and what I need. Some people say, well, that's not true. I like doing everything for everybody else. And that can be a good thing, or if it comes from the ego part, that makes you kind of like the victim or the martyr and things like that. Okay? So there's a lot of different roles we can play with that. But what happens, why did the angels, which are the messengers of God, appear and tell this to Joseph, and he went down and hid? Well, you see, how many times have you had a good idea and got started on it, and then you let that other part of you tell you how silly or how stupid or how it wouldn't work, blah, 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 blah. Has anybody ever done that? Yeah, it kind of kills the idea. Okay? So when you have a new idea like this, you've got to nurture it and you've got to protect it against the protest of the ego. And one of the main reasons why the ego protests that is because it likes the status quo and doesn't like change. It likes things to stay the way they are. You might say, well, the ego is an addict. Yeah, but the addict knows how to manage being an addict. Might not like it, but they know how to manage it. So rather than changing, which they don't know, they rather stay that way because they know how to work in that realm. That's why we get trapped in our stuff that we want to get rid of, those bad habits. Why can't we just get rid of them? That's why. And so, you see, it's not a simple command structure where you got a line of authority like this. Okay? But yet in another sense, it is a simple command structure because the structure works the same. Doesn't matter what you're feeding into it. It'll work. Okay? It'll work for the affirmative or the negative, whatever you're feeding into it. So you always get your heart's desire. It's just a matter, we got to ask ourselves, what is it we truly desire? What is it that we want? And how many times people say, and maybe you've done this yourself, that you want something and you start, and we're just not prepared to do what is necessary to do to become the person it's necessary to become, to have the experience that we want to have. It's too hard. If I'd have known it this hard, I never started in the first place. Anybody got any of those? Yeah, I got one I'm working on. I'm not going to tell you about it till I'm finished with it, but it's a pretty good one. It's been bugging me for a couple of 3 or 4 years now. I didn't even know it's been bugging me longer than that. So it's one of those little things. Like, I like to talk about things after I work with them, not right in the middle of them, you know. And I'll do it, but I'm just avoiding it right now. Anybody avoiding anything right now? Yeah, we are. And that's okay. Long as we don't start whining about why aren't we getting anywhere? Why aren't things happening? Why does this always happen to me? Okay? Yeah, we all got things to deal with. But then let's don't make life complicated. Oh, well, I got to fix this, and once this is fixed, I got to fix that. If you want to have a consciousness of something to fix, and you run out of things to fix, you'll get more things to fix that you didn't even know you had to fix, just because you got a fix-it consciousness. I don't want to fix anything. I just want to enjoy the experience and embrace life. People come to me and say, Reverend Doug, you wouldn't believe how wonderful things are going. It's just fantastic. I said, great, enjoy it. It won't last. Somebody else comes to me, Reverend Doug, you wouldn't believe how miserable, terrible this is happening, this is happening. Oh, you wouldn't believe it. You know what I say? Enjoy it. It won't last. Okay? So things are always going to be in a state and change of flux. That's a given. It's not a question. It's just a matter of how are we going to position ourselves and what role are we going to play in it. Do we want to be in there directing it? Do we want to be in there creating? Do we want to be in there experiencing it? Or do we want to just sit back and let it roll? In both cases, you get to say, well, I'm in the flow, right? And I always say, that's good. Examine the flow, because both the river and the sewer flow. Make sure you know which one you're in. Very important. And if you don't like the one you're in, move to the next flow. Put yourself in there. We have that ability. We have that power. So at this time of the season, we come into Central Command, and there's a lot of little stories going in on here about Christmas. Anybody got any of those going on? We always get a lot more. Watch the stories. Remember who's in control. It's not a Christmas therapy group where you don't believe in yourself anymore, or all the other people laugh and call you names, or any of that kind of stuff. It's not about that. It's about how you manage what's going on and remembering who's in charge. Who's in charge? We are in charge. No matter what, we might not be able to control anything out there. However, we have the power to control how we respond to and deal with anything that's going on in our lives. That is our choice. Don't give it away. Take back your power. And when you take back your power, then you create a place where something new and wonderful and different can happen. So I know for you, as I know for myself, that Central Command has got a tight rein on things and is open and receptive to whatever's going on, but knows who's the boss and who's in charge. So we declare that, we accept that, and we know that, and we give thanks for it, and so it is. Woo-hoo!